Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's hearing me okay. Just want to welcome everyone. My name's Eva, and I am a founder here of Awesome Careers. Wanted to give you all an opportunity to talk and learn about different types of careers out there and a resource and tool to help you build your career as you're going forward. So, hello, welcome. I'm here tonight. This is our first podcast on our segment Meet the Pros, and I'm joined by my very good friend here, Jennifer Lee. No relations. Jennifer is going to share with us about her career path and how she pursued a career in human resources. So HR for short, for folks out there who are like, what's human resource, right? She's going to dive in and talk about it further as well. For folks who are new, if you are here with us for the first time, feel free to type in chat, hi. We're excited to see and hear from you all. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Or if you're catching us on the replay on YouTube or on Facebook. And so again, thank you all so much for joining. Again, my name's Eva Lee. I am a career content creator, or, as some folks call it today, but old-fashioned career counselor, old-fashioned current role senior career advisor. I talk a lot and engage a lot about careers. And one of the first things I talk about is often what's happening in my community. What type of careers do my community know or are aware of? And so I'm always picking brains with people, always curious about what they do. And this is the first launch of Meet the Pros, where I wanted to bring this back into our community in a different way that I had never done before. So I'm very excited. So it looks like we have some folks. We have, is it Cho Zhang? Hi, welcome. And we have, Miho from our Fresno, looking forward to tonight's segment. Welcome. Zoya, hi, Mai's going to be our, topic in the next third episodes from now. She's going to talk about her work in social work too. So again, come join us during the session as well. So thank you all so much for that. I really appreciate that. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome here Jennifer. Jennifer, how are you feeling tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm really excited about this segment. I think it's a really much needed segment that I think, is going to benefit a lot of people. I've had over 5 years in HR, and so I've helped a lot of people, I think, find jobs and stuff. That's actually how I met Eva. She works at one of the career centers and stuff that I worked with. And I also attended one of her nuts and bolts resume workshops. And so that's actually how I met her. And yeah, I think working in HR, it's definitely a really fun, dynamic field. I've worked in all sorts of industries. I started out in staffing. I've worked in government. I've worked for a financial tech company, worked in manufacturing. I'm currently working for a nonprofit. And so it's definitely something that I would recommend to folks who are really oriented towards a career in business, but kind of the people side of business. It's fun and rewarding, and there's definitely challenges, but I feel like it's a field that you can pivot very easily. I was actually talking to Eva about, the different opportunities and stuff that you can find in HR, and I hope that, what I share with you guys really helps you. So.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it in 2 points there. That for folks who don't know, what is HR? What is human resources? And would someone who's, let's say, either new or changing careers, what would they learn? What should they learn about HR? What's the function of HR, first of all?
Yeah, so I look at HR as a strategic business unit, right, within an organization. And HR is really, we manage the people components of an organization. Anything that touches the employee life cycle, from, recruiting employees to onboarding them to developing them to, even having to deal with firing employees or the disciplinary actions and stuff with employees. There's different components of HR. There's compensation and benefits, or total rewards, that's usually called in HR. There's, the recruiting aspect, also called talent acquisition. If you're someone who enjoys talking to people, helping people find jobs within your organization, if you're really good at identifying really top candidates for certain roles and stuff, being a recruiter or working in talent acquisition could be a job for you. Even within talent acquisition, there's different roles. There's, people who do sourcing where they go out and they actively like look for candidates. And then, you have other folks who work in talent acquisition who like review resumes and they schedule interviews and they do screenings. And there's also employee relations. If you're someone who is a problem solver, you don't mind dealing with tough issues. You're someone who is really good at navigating like tough relationships or relationships within an organization. Like employee relations might be something that you want to look into. There's training and development. So if you're someone who loves to teach, if you're someone who, is really into like teaching people about certain concepts or teaching people how to, grow within their field, learning and development or training and development might be something that you want to look into. There's, health and safety. If you're a really big proponent of, COVID, 19 safety things, or, you want to make sure that your employees and stuff are safe, you can always go into that. A really big thing right now, especially with everything that's going on in the world, is DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's a huge field right now. It's much needed, obviously, at various organizations. So if you really want to contribute in that way and really talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion within organizations, private, public, nonprofit, there's those opportunities and stuff for you. And what's really great about HR is that there's HR in every like type of industry that you can go into. So it's like you want to work in nonprofit, there's HR in nonprofit. If you want to work, in healthcare, there's HR in healthcare. If you want to work in, government, there's HR in government. So that's something that's really great about this field. And it's something that I feel it's a career that you can pivot very easily to.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you for laying down like sort of like the foundations, right, of what HR does, right? And there's a lot of segments, a lot of little components within HR. It's a big field that encompasses a lot of different areas depending on people's interests and strengths, right? Like you mentioned, some people are going to be great at tackling those relationships, right? Or training people or like scouting talent, right? So absolutely. So if you have a tack and interest, right, we're going to dive a little deeper. And so definitely check out more about HR. So the next question we have for Jennifer is, again, tell us about you. How did you, of all the things, like what did you study or what did you do? How did you come across this path of HR? How did you know this was going to be a career for you?
So the easy answer is that I did know that this was going to be the career for me. I think like most, because I am a first generation college student. My parents were farmers. They didn't go to college and stuff. And so it was kind of like by accident, which is, I think, what a lot of HR people's story is. Like they kind of fell into HR. But my undergrad was actually in mass communications and journalism with an emphasis in advertising. I just happened to graduate during 2008 during the recession. And advertising during that time was not, a very big thing. So I ended up going to work for this government agency. And working there, I met my first mentor, who was a staff analyst. And I was kind of like, seeing what kind of work and stuff she was doing. And at that time, I was volunteering for a bunch of stuff. And one of those things was like the employee engagement related stuff. And she was, overseeing that. And so that's kind of how I met her. And I had asked her, like, how did you get into your job? It sounds so interesting. And she kind of gave me like a pathway. Like she and I actually made an appointment with her and I asked her, if we could sit down with, coffee and stuff and just chat about how she got into her position. And she was like, yeah, just come to my desk, and we can have a conversation. And I was really fortunate because the organization I worked at was really about, development. And so they knew that I was interested in, learning more from her. So my boss was like, take an hour and go and talk to her. So I was like, okay. So I went and I, chatted with her for about an hour and she was telling me how she became a staff analyst. And she basically gave me the roadmap to how she got into her career. And so I basically followed her roadmap. Like everything that she did, I was like, okay, I'm going to do everything that you do so that I can get to, your job. And so I just kind of followed those steps. And I was fortunate in that, my first boss, when So one of the first things that she did was she became a management program assistant, which at my organization, you deal with a lot of like personnel files, you do like employee actions, you deal with employee files, basically HR related things, but it just wasn't under the HR umbrella at the organization. And so I was really fortunate that my first boss was like someone really great, and he was really trusting of me. I had to kind of build that trust, but he trusted me like once he knew what I was capable of, and he gave me, you know, room to grow, and he allowed me to do like a lot of things. Like I worked on grievances, I worked on, you know, with labor relations. I got to do a lot of stuff that I don't think, you know, other people in my position would have gotten to do if, you know, my boss wasn't my boss. So I was really fortunate. I had a really great leader to work under. And then from there, I mean, it was kind of like a little up and down kind of pathway. It's not straightforward. So from that position, I decided that, okay, I wanted to go to a different organization. I ended up working in immigration, and while working in immigration, I met someone there who was currently going to school, and he was, you know, we had been talking a lot about me going back to school to get my MBA, and he was like, let me just call up my counselor, and you can talk to my counselor. And I ended up talking to his counselor, and literally like the next day I was like signed up for like the MBA program at the school. And so it was an MBA program with an emphasis in HR. And at that time I had been like applying for HR jobs, but it was really hard to get into the field without having had like an actual HR title. And so what I ended up doing was I was thinking, okay, well, if I get a degree in HR, you know, it might be easier for me to find a job, which is not what I recommend for a lot of people. Knowing what I know now is not, you know, the pathway that I would recommend for people. But at that time, that's what I was thinking. And I think like a lot of people think that way, that if, you know, they just go and get a degree in a certain, you know, field, that they're going to get a job, which is not reality. Reality is that a lot of times employers expect you to have experience in that particular field. But knowing what I knew from, you know, because I had already gone to undergraduate school, so I already knew what I didn't know back then, which was while you're in school, do an internship, you know, like get a job, get actual experience. And so what I ended up doing was actually resigned from my job at the government so I could focus on, you know, my new career path. And I was debating whether or not to do an internship, and I decided I'm just going to apply for a job because, you know, I'm going to get paid like the same as, you know, like an intern if I do like an entry-level job. So I had applied for an HR assistant position at a staffing company where I didn't have anyone there, which is a really tough job to do if you don't have anyone there who knows HR. It's like your first HR job. And so when I started working there, it's like I had to really learn HR for myself. And it was actually really scary because HR is very, there's a lot of legal stuff behind it. And if you don't know your stuff, like you can get the organization into a lot of trouble. And so I remember doing that job at the staffing company and thinking like, I don't know if I want to do this. And I've already quit my previous job and I wasn't, you know, paying tuition to go to, you know, this MBA program to, you know, study HR full time. And so I was like, maybe I made like the biggest mistake in my life, you know, like just quit this like really great job to go back to school to do HR. And fortunately, what ended up happening was I worked with a lot of different recruiters in my area. And one of the recruiters reached out to me and let me know that there was like an HR generalist position. It was a, you know, temporary position, but it was at this really great healthcare organization, which is, I still love like my memory of working there. It was a really great opportunity and I grew so much out of that position. But from my kind of scare of what happened with the staffing company where I was like this new HR person, there's like no other HR person there, I learned to ask the right questions. And so I talked to the director of HR who's going to be overseeing my position. And I talked to her before I went into the role and I had asked her, I told her like, you know, I'm so new to HR. I'm really looking for someone who can teach me like the ins and outs of HR. And she really took me under her wings and she told me like, you know, don't be scared. You know, I'll be there to guide you. I'll be there to help you grow. And when I got into the organization, she really followed through with what she said. And so initially, I mean, I came on board to do one thing and then I ended up, doing so many different things in HR and like really growing like my HR muscles. And I started building really great relationships. I mean, talent acquisition there was completely separate from what I was doing, which was in core HR. And I was able to really build relationships with people in talent acquisition to really learn like what recruiters do and sourcers do. And I worked really closely with people in compensation and benefits. And so I started learning like how they do their job. And I think having that attitude of knowing that you don't know everything and knowing that there's a lot of stuff to learn and having the willingness to go and ask questions and not necessarily take up people's time, but genuinely, like let them know that you're interested in learning something. It opens doors for you because it allows you to learn a lot of things that you don't know, and it kind of, skills you up. And so I was able to take on, all these responsibilities that enabled me to have my next, job. And I was able to work at a financial tech company where, people experience there was, a really big thing. And there I got to do recruiting. And so that's kind of how I met Ava, because I was working with like schools and stuff, and I'm signing up for, career fairs and everything. And that's how I met Ava, because she works at one of the schools that we, wanted to go and do our career fairs and stuff at. So I was able to do that. I got to do like onboarding there, which I'm not a big, like I have a fear of actually speaking in front of people, right? And so I know my own weaknesses, but I was kind of pushed into this role where I had to do onboarding, and onboarding is like, you could be talking to one person, you could be talking to 10 people, you could be talking to 50 people, right? Depending on however many people you're going to be onboarding. And so it kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone. And I feel like that's how you grow. Like when you're pushed out of your comfort zone, it forces you to stretch, your muscles, and it kind of teaches you like that you're capable of certain things, and kind of builds your confidence. And so at the beginning, I remember I was like so terrified to like do it, because I was like, what if I mess up? And our learning and development person there was like, don't worry about it. They won't even know if you mess up, because they don't know, like, what you're going to be going over. So
they don't know what you're presenting on, so you wouldn't mess up. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was like, if you mess up, then just kind of roll with it and make it seem like it was intentional, like it was all part of it. And so I started getting really confident, and then the more I did it, like, the more I made it my own. And I was able to not only do that, but then I volunteered to help with certain, functions and stuff that, our HR admin was doing. And then when our HR admin left, I ended up taking on some of her responsibilities. And I just, I'm the type of person who is constantly like wanting to learn and grow. And you really need to have that sort of attitude and personality in HR. And one of the reasons why is because HR is always changing. Like there's always different laws. There's always different policies that come out. Even at organizations, like things are changing all the time. So you have to be really like adaptable. You have to be really resourceful. You have to, be able to really have that growth mindset and go after, those learning opportunities that maybe like someone else might not see that as a learning opportunity, but, like if there's, a will, there's a way, and you can find your way into like learning something. And so I was able to do that. And then from there, I just like, I had all these other opportunities. I was stuck at a place in my career where after that, I went to a healthcare organization, and I was kind of stuck like in the entry mid-level range of my career. And so I was just like, how do I move, upwards, right? And that was always my mentality. Like I was so anxious and eager to like just keep moving up. And I think a lot of people are like that. Like they don't think, that there's other opportunities or other ways to go. And I was always like, okay, I want to become an HR, business partner or HR manager, or, like some kind of like higher level role. And that was like my goal at the time. I was kind of naive, I think, when I was younger. And so I talked to a recruiter who hires like HR people all the time. And she and I had been building a relationship for a couple of months. And so I reached out to her and I was talking to her and I was like, I know you recruit a lot of HR people. Like, what do you look for, when you're hiring HR people? And she was like, well, I mean, one of the things that my organization, like all of our candidates that are in HR, they have to have a certification. Like, we don't refer anyone over to an organization unless they are certified. And so, and at the time, I was also really involved in our local HR organization here in Sacramento. And so, by the way, I'm in Sacramento. So our HR organization here in Sacramento had a mentorship program, which I signed up for. So at the time, I had an HR mentor. I was talking to this recruiter, and they both are saying the same thing, like, get your certification. So I had applied to get my certification. It's a grueling process. Like, it's expensive. It's like, it takes a lot of studying and a lot of time. And especially when you're working like a full-time job, it's really difficult to do because you really have to study ahead of time to pass that certification. And so I was doing that. And when I became certified, like, all of these doors opened for me. I mean, the recruiter reached out to me when she found out I got certified, and she was like, there's this, opportunity for you to be like, build your own HR department, and you get to build all the functions and stuff from the ground up. And I was so excited because I've always taken like a strategic approach to HR. And so, and I've had really great leaders to look up to, and I've learned a lot from them. And so being able to utilize those, that knowledge, skills, and abilities and stuff that I gained from my time with them, I was able to really apply it to this role. And I ended up getting the job there and overseeing, all of HR for a small manufacturing company, a small global manufacturing company. So that position was, I think, like, I pulled all of my knowledge to really do that job. All of my connections. I mean, being a smaller company, you don't get to work with a lot of, your budget's not very big. And so you have to learn how to be really creative in how you're going to do certain things. Like, for example, we didn't have a learning management system because, it's been a small company. So they've never needed really, a learning management system.
Large
rate. But then I was like, but you guys need to do sexual harassment training. That's the, it's like the law. So you guys need to do that. So I was like, we really need to get some sort of learning management system or some sort of training for, the employees. And obviously there's health and safety training that they should have been doing. And there's, all these other trainings and stuff. And so we really needed a learning management system. We really needed someone to help us with our benefits because the benefits there wasn't, I mean, we had, the basic benefits, but I wanted to create a more robust benefits package for, candidates and to attract better talent to the organization. Right. And I was so fortunate that because I was able to build these relationships over time and make the right connections and stuff, I actually had someone who worked in benefits reach out to me and asked me hey, can I come and do a presentation and kind of tell you what we do? And I was like, please do. So he came over and I mean, he was telling me did you know that as a small company, you can get X, Y, and Z? And I was like, I had no idea. So, I mean, I learned a lot from him too. And we were able to bring them on as our, benefits broker. And I just learned so much in that role because that role wasn't just HR, but it was also very operations oriented. So I worked with a lot of HR vendors, but I also worked with a lot of operations related things. And my boss, I report directly to the CEO. And I mean, he and I would have strategic meetings every evening. And it was sometimes it was a 3-4 hour session. So it was a really great job. And then when COVID hit, it was so stressful because mind you, this is a global, manufacturing company, and we had different offices in different parts of the world, and COVID in different parts of the world, was being handled very differently. And so here I was, I mean, COVID was new to me too, but I had to start creating health and safety policies for the company to protect our employees. And luckily, at the time, my company had a transition to a new a technology kind of system. and we had like a third-party person helping us with transitioning over to basically Microsoft Office products. And that enabled us to do things like have team meetings easier or do communications easier. And so right before COVID hit, we had actually like finalized some of that transition. And we started, you know, I was very up to date with kind of like what was going on in the HR world. And I kept watching the news to see what was happening with like, you know, COVID. And I was like, okay, I have a feeling we're going to have to go remote soon, you know? And so this is back in like early March. And we started, you know, planning ahead and thinking, okay, what are we going to be doing if we have to close, you know, like the company due to COVID? What are the steps we're going to have to take? So we started creating like an action plan way ahead of time. And so I was sitting there like writing out what we're going to do, the steps and stuff, telling my, you know, CEO, like, this is what I advise us to do. These are some of the health and safety things we have to, you know, take into consideration. And it was a lot. Like it was literally like we had to furlough some employees. It was like months of like just not knowing, and really difficult conversations. It was really stressful because on top of that, like my company had just moved into the area like the year before. So we were still in that kind of transition phase as well. And so it was like that on top of that. And I mean, people were coming to me asking me like for the answers to everything, and I was like, I don't know either. I'm learning with you. We never had a pandemic before, so I'm learning with you. But it wasn't like I couldn't tell them like I don't know. I had to tell them like, you know, let me find out, you know, and and that's usually, you know, the answers to a lot of HR related things is like, let me find out. If you don't know something, like you go and you look for it, and so, I mean, doing that for literally months and months and months, I just got so burnt out. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, I worked so hard to get to the point where I could have my own HR team. I could have my own HR department. And I built like my career kind of on an upward trajectory, right? Like, this is what I always wanted. And this is what I worked so hard for. But then when I got there, I became so burnt out.
Because wham, with COVID, that's what happened.
And I was literally working like 12 to 15-hour days, and I was just so exhausted. And I'm someone who, you know, like I like to do my research, you know, and I like to make sure that, you know, I dot my I's, cross my T's. And so it was really hard for me to, you know, not watch the news or, you know, like not be up to date with what was going on with COVID and update like my, you know, my boss and let him know what was going on. And so, I mean, my boss would always tell me like, you can take a day off, you know, and I was like, I can't relax, you know, like there's so much stuff that can go wrong if we don't follow like certain protocols. And so, and I think you kind of have to have that mentality as well if you're like an HR, like you have to think ahead about, you know, the possible consequences of not doing something, right? A lot of times people just sit and they wait to see what happens, but I like to think ahead and think like, okay, what are the possible scenarios? What do we need to have in place to, you know, handle those things? And so I was making action plans for, okay, if this is what we're going to do if this happens, this is what we're going to do if this happens. And I was so exhausted to the point where I was just like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And so I actually put in my resignation without having like a position lined up. I didn't have anything lined up. I just knew I needed rest because I was so burnt out and so exhausted, like emotionally, mentally, physically exhausted. And I honestly didn't know at that point if I even wanted to stay in HR because it was just so much. And I decided that I was actually going to initially take 2 months off. But at the time I ended up, you know, just kind of applying for jobs just in case. And I came across this really great opportunity. I mean, I love recruiting. That's the part of HR that I have enjoyed so much. And so I came across this position at this really great organization, and it was a position that had a team. So I wasn't going to be
so it wouldn't be you alone. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was going to be working in this really great, you know, organization. And so I applied for that position, and I mean, it was a pretty intensive, like, interview process, but it was so worth it. Like, I'm in that position now. I'm a talent coordinator now for the Nature Conservancy, which is a huge conservation organization. And they have an office here in California and specifically in Sacramento. And so, that opportunity is like a once in a lifetime type of opportunity. The organization does amazing things. Its mission, vision, values really align with what, I, really love and what I want to do too. And so, kind of like when your own values and your own, what you want to do in life, like aligns with what an organization does, it's kind of like almost like, serendipitous. Like you're just like, oh my gosh, like this is meant to happen. And so that's what I'm doing now. And I help with recruiting. I help with onboarding, offboarding, and employee experience is, a big part of what I'm going to be doing. So I'm truly fortunate that I think like my career path is definitely not straightforward. And what I would advise for anyone who is going into HR, who wants to go into HR, is that, it's not always upwards. There's different ways that you can navigate your career. Like, especially when you work in a field like HR, where there's so many different opportunities. You have like all those different areas that I mentioned before that you can go into. If you're someone who's really analytical and you love data, like you can, become an HRIS specialist. If you're someone who is really good with numbers and you love like, working with money and stuff like that, you can become like a compensation analyst. If you really like benefits and you like, helping people understand like, their what they get as an employee, you might want to become a benefits specialist, So there's like so many different avenues of HR. And that's what I love about this field is like, you can't, like, there are people who are benefits, specialists for their entire lives. Like that's all that they do. And they're perfectly happy doing that, And there are people who are, like they've been in compensation for years and years and they love doing that. And so it's not just, okay, you become an HR manager, you become an HR director, you become the VP of HR. Like there's not just an upward mobility in the field, but, there's lateral ways that you can really grow. And I think that's something that I would like anyone who's going to HR to understand is that don't be so eager to grow upwards.
A lot of people get into the mentality of like their career where you're a young professional, you're climbing up, and the goal is to sort of like there's this imaginative mountain apparently that all of us see, but we don't really physically see, right? But we imagine this big giant mountain and we're climbing, but we're forgetting about like all the other things that can also potentially grow and happen, as we're going up.
Yeah, and you can grow so much as a person just from understanding like the different, lateral moves that you can make, and something like Sheryl Sandberg said is like, the career that you might love doing and want to do and stuff, it might not even exist yet. And so if you're constantly looking upwards, right, and you're just thinking like, oh, I want to be this, and I want to be this, and I want to do that, and like you just think like you just want to climb up, well, you're not looking around you at the different opportunities that might be there, and you might miss out on a position that might not have, existed like, 5 years ago. And like DEI, for example, right, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, I'm pretty sure that not a lot of people even really knew what those, like that field really was until it started becoming, a thing. And then now you have people who specialize in that now, and you have people who are like, that's what they do. And like, 10, 20 years ago, did that position even exist? And so there's different, if you're constantly just looking in one direction, you're missing out on the other opportunities around you. And so, one thing that I have learned just as a professional is that who I was at 20 is definitely not who I am at 30, 35, right? I'm a totally different person. So what I wanted to be at 20 is like, I didn't know what I wanted to be, right? And I had this idea in my head of what success was. And success looks completely different to me now. Like back then, success to me was very superficial things. Like it was money. It was like, having a big title. It was like, owning a big house, having fancy cars.
Items, right? Like you can touch your car or house.
Yeah, very superficial things. And I married someone who is not a superficial person. He's very much just like, you know, we live in a house, we have a roof over our head, we're good. We have a vehicle that has 4 wheels and moves, so we're good.
Right.
So because of him, I think it's humbled me a little bit, and it's allowed me to realize like what is really important. And now, you know, in my 30s, I'm realizing, you know, what is really important to me is not a title. It's not like being an HR manager is not my priority. Like being an HR director is not my priority. My priority is personal fulfillment. Like, what do I want my life to look like? And I think a lot of people build their life around the career and stuff that they want. And I'm like, why do people do that? You know, like, your life is your life. You only have one of it. Like, your career should fit into the life that you want to build, not the other way around, you know? And so I thought about the type of life that I wanted. And this was something I kind of had to come to grips with when I went through my burnout, because I was like, I'm so tired and like I'm so exhausted. I worked so hard to get to this position that I'm in now. And now that I'm here, like, is this the life that I really wanted for myself, you know? And so I had to sit down and kind of reevaluate like my life and what I really wanted. And so I was like, you know, I really want a really balanced life. Like, for me, my relationships are so important, but I was working 12 to 15-hour days. So how much time was I spending with my husband? You know, how much time was I spending with my family? So I knew, like, I wanted a job where I had a good balance between my work and my personal life. And I wanted a position or a job that aligned really well with my own personal beliefs. Like, I wanted to make a difference in the world. I mean, working for-profit companies is really exciting because, you know, like, you get to see different innovations in technology and how they like deal with, you know, profit and stuff. And it's really exciting. And you get all these bonuses as you work really hard. There's like, you know, definitely advantages and stuff.
Different incentives.
Yeah. And I think, like, if I was younger, for me, that would have been so exciting. But being, you know, in my mid-30s now, I'm more like, I want something that I can leave behind for my children. You know, I want to work in an organization that's actually making a difference in the world. I want to make sure that the organization I work for is leaving behind like a positive footprint in the world, and not, you know, negatively impacting our planet. And so, I mean, the organization I work at now is very much about, you know, protecting our land and water, you know, climate change, like things that when I have children, I mean, the impact that my organization is going to make, like, they're going to see it, you know? And so that kind of stuff, like, is what is personally fulfilling for me. And so if you're constantly just chasing after like superficial things, you are going to burn out like me.
It's not bad to want it. That's what, okay, just tell folks out you're listening. It's not bad to want it, but I think realistically, right, we can easily burn out.
Yeah, and I think that you just need, I mean, there's different, people are driven by different things, right? And definitely for me, like, once I kind of matured a little bit, and once I kind of learned myself a little bit and learned really what I valued and what I wanted, it helped me to really hone in on the type of career that I wanted and what type of organization I wanted to work for, and how, you know, my career would fit into my life and not necessarily my life would fit into my career. And so I wanted to build basically a holistic life that's really well-rounded, with, you know, my career being something I'm really proud of and proud to do, and something that I can look back on and be like, you know, I helped to hire these people that are now like solving these like climate crisis problems, and like, you know, like something that I can look back on and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, you know, I helped to make that happen. And I think that to me is just super rewarding, and being able to make that type of impact is really rewarding. But that's not to say that if you want to work at a for-profit company, there's anything wrong with that. There's different, people have different, you know, goals and stuff. And as someone who, if you're someone who's kind of starting out in your career and you're not quite sure what you want to do, what I would say is explore. Like, I wouldn't have known I wanted to do this if I didn't work for that for-profit company, if I didn't, you know, work for that financial tech company, if I didn't work for the healthcare organization. And every single job that I've had and every step that I've gone through that has helped me become who I am today. And it's helped me have the skills and stuff that I do today. Because without that, I wouldn't have that. So
That's so great, Jennifer. I am so proud of you. And I know that our folks here in chat, if you're here, say hi. There's a lot of good folks in here tonight. And you really highlight some really wonderful things. And what I've heard was also some themes I heard. So like, for example, like going into HR, right? Kind of like understanding the field more, right? And you're planning to go like research it, right? Understand what are the needs. And I think you came across like the biggest hurdles, like, yeah, you're going to apply for all these positions, but they're not going to hire you until you got the certification. And once it did, it really opened those doors, right?
yeah.
And then I think you pinpoint at multiple times in this story, right, about like having mentors, people who are willing to sit down with you and say, what are you interested? Let me teach you. Here's a roadmap to my career. Copy it, right? Or
exactly.
not copy it, but like, here's a roadmap. Here's how I did it, right? And I think that's so valuable, is to find mentors, and not just people often think, like having like one mentor. And I'm going to tell folks, no, have multiple mentors. You want different perspectives from different folks who's going to shine the light about potentials that you don't know, or who's going to be out there for your best interest and say, hey, this is worth it, right? Or no, this is not worth it. You might want to check this out instead. And who's just really there to cheer you on and be your champion. Right. So I think that was so valuable about what you put at different stages, right? At different organizations, whether it was the CEO, or like, again, someone that says your boss willing to say, take an hour, go down there, go talk to so-and-so, right? So that was so valuable, is having mentors, right? I think that's what really was a theme that was emerging very heavily. But also I think the other piece also is realizing that there are so many different occupations that people don't realize in this field. And as you do more, as you grow more, you'll see people are going to be specialists in their field. They're going to be great. They could be working in that job for like 30 plus years. Who knows, right? Or they might be there for a year or two and they're like, hey, it's not for me. And they move on. And there's no right or wrong path about it, right? I tell folks, we're emotional people. We have a lot of interests, and being able, and I think that was the part, but the other theme is being hungry to learn, hungry to say, I don't know. I'm looking for a mentor to teach me the ropes. Can you be my mentor to teach me the ropes? Can you share with me your knowledge and your approach to doing things? And I think that was so valuable, right? I think oftentimes people go into the field, like you have to know everything. By the time you start your first day on the job, you should know everything about HR. The reality is, no, you have no idea what the organization, how they approach HR, right? So you're learning and being, I think, brave, right? That's the other piece, is being brave to ask questions and say, I don't know, or I haven't came across a situation before, like COVID, right? Let me go check, right? And being authentic in that approach and saying, I don't know, I'm going to learn, let's learn together.
Yeah, and I think what's really important is, like, when you get to a certain point in your career, it's important for you to give back as well, right? So I've been really fortunate that I've had really great mentors. I've had phenomenal leaders I've worked for. Even though I've left certain organizations, like every single leader that I've had, has taught me something, whether it's, good things to do or things I shouldn't be doing. Like, I learned something from every leader that I've worked for. And I've taken all of those, knowledge and stuff with me to whatever position I'm in. And I always, even if I was like a CEO of an organization, for me, like, it's always important to really be humble. Even CEOs don't know everything, right? Just because you're a CEO doesn't mean you know everything. So it's really important that, as you're growing and stuff, that you are still humble in your approach to growth and learning. And then when you get to a certain point where you can now kind of teach other people about certain areas, it's really important for me to be able to give back in that way. So something that I've been doing is I've been mentoring people, right? Like, I used to do these like Zoom meetings with like my mentees, and I'd have like, 5 to 8 people that I would work with. And then I would work with them one-on-one, depending on where they were at in their career. And I would help them, like fix their resume so that's very like HR ready. I would help them like prepare for interviews. I would teach them like job searching techniques. I would, teach them how to network. I think networking isn't something that is like, it comes natural to everyone. And so I taught them how to network, and I was, allowing the knowledge and stuff that I learned to be passed on to other people so that they could, grow in their career and that they could find their own path. And what I really want as a person who works in HR is to help really the next generation of HR people and HR professionals and make sure that they are good HR people. You definitely have people in HR who are there for the wrong reason, and are not necessarily they may not necessarily have the best intentions. And I don't want the people that are going into my field to be those type of people, right? I want them to be really there to help people. I think the important thing about HR, and HR kind of has a bad rep. I think you watch The Office and you see kind of how HR is perceived and, those types of shows. And I talk to, my family, and they're always like, oh, I hate HR. And I'm like, well, why? Why do you hate HR? And they're always like, because HR, all they care about is the company, and, they don't care about you. They're going to fire you. And I was like, well, I don't ever want to be that type of HR person, and I don't want the people that are going to go into the field, the future generation of HR professionals, to be that type of person either. So I want to make sure that if, the next generation of HR people that are going into the field, they come into the field with the right mindset, with the right attitude, and they're not there to put employees down. They're not there to hurt people, that they're going into the field for the right reason. And I think something that I hear a lot from people is that they want to go into HR because they love people. They love working with people. But the thing is, with HR, you're going to have to deal with sometimes really difficult employees that you are not going to necessarily like. And you're going to sometimes have to fire people and do really hard things that if you love people, it's going to be really tough for you because you're going to hurt those people's feelings. And so you're going to have to build a backbone and, learn how to deal with this type of issues. So HR is not just necessarily for people who love people. If you love people, there's definitely different jobs for you to do.
Yeah, I always tell folks as a joke, if you want to make people happy, if that's your goal, open an ice cream shop. Lots of people will be happy.
Exactly. And so I think
if you want to work with people, right, help them troubleshoot, right?
Yeah.
Help them, and that's where I tell that's what distinguishes an ice cream shop about making people happy versus working with people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I feel and when I hear that, I'm always like, oh man, if you love people and you come to HR and then you have to fire someone, I don't know if you're going to like yourself at the end of the day, because it's a really tough thing to do. And but the thing is, even if you don't like people, the right attitude is treating people with kindness, dignity, and respect, no matter what. And that should be any HR professional's approach to anything. It's especially in this environment where diversity is such a huge thing, right, in an organization. And you want to make sure that you, even if you don't know what someone's going through, that you have that empathy and you have that sense of kindness, and you treat people with the dignity and stuff that they deserve. So even if I'm firing someone, I'm not going to be like, oh, you suck, and that's why I'm firing you. I make sure
laying someone off. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I make sure that I treat them with the dignity and respect that they deserve. They're a human being, they, and the thing is, there are repercussions to treating people badly, especially when you work in HR. You have, people who you don't know what the reaction is going to be. So if you treat them really poorly and you fire them and you say all these mean, nasty things to them, who's to stop them from coming back and doing something terrible, And so I'm always of the mindset that you should always treat people with dignity, kindness and respect, no matter what the situation is. Even if that person is a horrible person, it doesn't matter how that person reacts, it's how you react to that person. And you are also a representation of your organization. And that's something that all HR people should remember. As an HR professional, you represent your organization, right? And so how you treat someone is how the company treats people, And so when I hear the stigma of HR is horrible, HR is I'm always like, man, I do not want to be that type of person. I do not want to mentor people who are going to become that type of person. And I mean, I'm part of a lot of HR groups on Facebook, and I came across this situation where it was like Halloween, and the employee like dressed in this Native American like outfit for the costume, and another employee was very offended and put in a complaint, and that HR person's response was like, this person's overreacting, like it's just a costume. And my approach to it is like, you definitely need to take that complaint seriously, because if that person finds offense in it, then you need to be understanding and understand like what diversity and inclusion and everything means, because, if that person's offended, you need to take their reaction seriously. You need to treat that situation with the respect and dignity that it deserves. And for you to be making fun of that employee and saying like, that employee is overreacting, like, I can't believe like I had to deal with that today. I was just like, that is definitely the wrong approach. And that's not the type of HR person that I want to mentor. I want, to come into the field. And so I think it's just really important that if you're going into this field, that you definitely always treat people with kindness and respect, no matter what. And so,
Yeah, we're coming down to the last few minutes here. Oh my goodness, time goes by so fast. But really quick, I know, and Jennifer, you answered some really good follow-up questions. Was like, the themes of the skill set that's needed to be successful in this job, right? And we've been kind of alluding to it earlier, like being able to work with people. And you talked about like communicating, right? Doing public speaking about, I think I myself too, I was very shy, right? And now I'm like, oh, I talk nonstop. I just can shut up, right? So, like communication skills, right? To be successful. It sounds like also you mentioned like writing policies and structure. So written skills, right? So again, your written communication skills, problem solving skills, right? In the situation, like, you coming across COVID situation, and now you have to figure out the like 10 steps ahead before the employees even ask what the first 3 steps are. So problem solving, communication, teamwork, what is it? Any other few skill set that you think that if someone's going into HR, they should know right off the back about developing these skill set now?
Definitely resourcefulness. Like, you have to be resourceful. A lot of times, like, you're going to be in situations that you have never encountered, no one else has ever encountered, and you have to find the answer to that, right? And so for me, like, what I do is I reach out to my network. I, Google things. I, read about stuff. I have to look up like laws and stuff, past, regulations and stuff regarding similar topics. And so being really resourceful, even things like going on YouTube and watching like videos or tutorials. And then the other skills that you really need in HR is being technologically savvy. It's really important, because you are going to, organizations have HR information systems, which is, what they use to store like employee information, to process personnel actions and stuff. So every organization, is probably going to have a different HRIS. And if you don't have the technological savvy to like pick it up very quickly, you're going to struggle a lot. So I would say be technologically savvy. What I do personally is, if I know that an organization uses a certain software that I'm not familiar with, I will go on Google or YouTube and I will watch tutorials. I will go and watch tutorials, literally like every tutorial I can find on how that system works, And then when I go into like an interview for a job that uses that system, I can say, okay, I have never used it, but I took a tutorial on YouTube on how to, use it, or I went to LinkedIn Learning and I learned how to use, the system, and just being really resourceful. And the other skill that you really need to have, of course, is empathy. Like, you need to be able to, you're going to have situations where employees are going to share with you really difficult moments in their lives. And if you're someone who doesn't have empathy, it's going to be a big problem because you need to be able to connect with your employees, to be able to provide them resources. I mean, let me tell you, when COVID hit, so many HR professionals were just like, I'm so sick of dealing with employees, like worrying about this and that. And I'm like, put yourself in their situation, they're scared. They don't know what's happening. And you need to be able to be that source of calm for them, to let them know, things are going to be okay. And instead of, attacking them or, thinking like they're acting irrationally, put yourself in their situation, and so having empathy, I think, is really important. And I think it's a skill that's not often talked about or thought of enough. And it's, one of those soft skills kind of thing, right? Where it's something, I don't want to say you either have it or you don't. It's definitely, it's something like you have to learn it. And then part of that is also being really mindful, right, of what other people are going through. So I think those are some of the key skills that you really, really need.
Yeah. So we're winding down here to the last few minutes here. And I know that folks have been popping in questions too. So if you have questions, feel free to pop them in. If you want to know more, ask a few questions from Jennifer while she's still here with us. We have really quick a question is, hi, Jennifer, how are you able to think outside of the box with building relationships with potential mentors who work in HR?
So I've always been a really inquisitive person. If I see someone doing something that I'm like, oh, what are you doing? That seems interesting. I'm naturally a type of person that would just go and ask, what are you doing? How did you do that? So I think it's really important for you to look. I think people think they need to quit their job and, go find a mentor or someone outside. But actually, the best resources are within your organization, currently, right? If you want to go into HR and you want to find a mentor, it's really good for you to look within your organization and go to maybe the HR person that works in your current organization and ask them, hey, can we do some a coffee chat or something? And let's talk about how you got into your career. It's something that really interests me. And you can find a mentor that way. Another way to find mentors is through local organizations. So I mentioned I am part of my local HR organization. So for those of you who don't know, if you are a student, there's an organization called the Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM. And if you are a student, you get a student member discount. So you can sign up for that. The SHRM organization also has local organizations within certain communities and stuff. And to find that, you just Google it, literally go to, SHRM Sacramento or something like that, and it'll pop up. And you can find your local SHRM organization or the closest one to you. So my local SHRM organization is called SAHRA. And SAHRA they have a mentorship program. So I went through that as well. And I built connections with people over time. Like I mentioned, I had recruiters that I had worked with for a really long time, and I kept in contact with them. And then when I came to a point where I was stuck in my career, I was like, who better to call than someone who hires, HR people? Ask them, what do employers look for? And so I, reached out to them, and I'm still in contact with them. And recruiters are some of the best, people you can really talk to about what you really need to do to get a job in a certain area, because they hire people all the time, right? But the other thing is they're also really, really busy. So you need to be really considerate of their time. So if they have availability, then treat it like gold, because they're often very, very busy. So yeah, just build those relationships over time, but definitely look within your organization, talk to people there, join Facebook groups. I think Facebook groups are some of the most underutilized resources out there. There are so many HR Facebook groups. If you want to go into HR, join those groups and see the type of questions that they ask, see the type of, see who always answers those questions, right? And reach out to that person and say, hey, I noticed that you know a lot about HR. I am just beginning my career in HR, or I'm really interested in it. If you have some time, I would love for us to maybe do lunch or coffee or something, and maybe sit down and talk about how you got into the field. It's really important for you to take a very authentic approach to things. And I always have the mindset, and I think this is just part of networking in general, is that like, there should always kind of be like a give and take kind of relationship. If you're constantly just asking for things from people, like that's going to wear very thin very quickly. So for me, for example, like the recruiters that I have built connections with over time, it's not just because like I'm asking them like, hey, do you have any availabilities or any jobs that you can, you know, like send my way? It's that when I know people who are looking for jobs, and they maybe they're looking for like an HR person, and I have a wide array of, you know, a big HR network and people who are constantly looking for jobs, you know, and I can say, I can give you a list of like 5 people right now who are looking for jobs, and, you know, like these people might be really good candidates for it, you know, and so it's give and take. Like, I don't ever go into like a relationship with just like, oh, you know, I need something, give me something. Like, it's always, you know, how can I help you? Like, thank you for helping me. How can I help you? It's a give and take kind of relationship. And that's maintaining that sort of relationship over time is really what networking is about. And I think if people take a me kind of approach to networking, your network is not going to be very strong. It is going to fall very quickly. So
those relationships are very thin, put it that way.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So you want to make sure that you're reaching out for a mentor, that you take a very genuine, authentic approach to it. And, you know, let them know, like, and the thing is, especially if you're a current student, is like people want to help students. Like, it's like when you're a student, like the world is your oyster. Like, everyone wants to help you because they know you're learning and stuff. So when you are a student, it's really, you really have like a whole array of people that you can turn to. If you're not sure where to start, you can, like, even if you're in school right now, there's an HR department at your school. Like, you can go and talk to someone there and ask them like how, you know, they got into HR. Definitely, like, I mean, use your network, like look around and see who's available that might be able to help you, and in turn, like, how can you help them, you know, and taking that kind of mindset and attitude towards it.
Great. We have one more question. Mel here asks, I have a question. Does HR decide on the organization's health benefits and coverage for the following year, or who does?
Well, HR is a big part of it. Some component to it is also, there's obviously like a financial component to what benefits and stuff you can add to an organization. And sometimes, like, we're not given a big budget. So if, you know, the benefits suck or something, and the company, it doesn't have a big budget to make the changes and stuff, then, you know, it might be a little while before like the benefits are going to improve. But a lot of times what HR does, or what HR should do, is kind of like survey how employees are feeling about their benefits, and if they're happy about it, if there's, you know, areas for improvement. So what I do is, as HR, when an employee, I have numerous employees asking me like the same things, like, you know, like, do we have an EAP? Like, is there a resource I can call? And if we don't, the natural thing for me to do is put that on my, like, let's consider this for next year's benefits, like open enrollment, and see like how much it's going to cost. And so, yeah, HR is a big part of that decision, but we're not the only one to make that decision, because there's obviously the financial factor. And so it has to, you know, get approved by finance. And sometimes benefits should align really with what an organization's like values and stuff are. I'm really fortunate that I work at a phenomenal organization with like wonderful benefits that align really well with their values, right? So any organization, if you go into HR, the way that you should be thinking about it is like, this is what the mission, vision, and values of my organization are. This is the way that, you know, like, our benefits should reflect that. So if, for example, like, you know, you value people, but then like your benefits are, you know, really not that great, like, you know, you don't have like enough pay time off, or you don't have any like, you know, like leave
vision,
or
dental, right? Benefit protection.
Exactly. exactly. So like my organization I work for, we have phenomenal benefits. Like we have benefits that support development and growth. We have benefits that support like adoption and conception, which is something that not a lot of organizations do. You know, we have extra leave for families. You know, like if you have like paid family leave, we have extra leave on top of like the state mandated like leave and stuff. So your benefits really should align with like the values and stuff of your company. And if it doesn't, then I, as an employee, I would challenge you to go ask your benefits, like whoever handles benefits of your organization, and ask them like, is there a way like next year, you know, you might consider adding this? Something that when I was an HR team of one that I encountered a lot was, for example, my employees asked all the time, like, you know, about life insurance, right? And so, I mean, that was definitely something that I was like, okay, so we can't, like financially at this point, we can't add on like a company sponsored life insurance, but what we can do is we can give like a discounted like life insurance that employees can sign up for. And so there's different ways that your organization can maneuver to add certain benefits, but really what an organization should do is really survey their employees to see like, you know, what they're really looking for or what they're missing. And if you at your organizations usually do things like employee surveys. And if you're not participating in that, then you're not being heard. So I would say, yeah, participate. So when you get those employee surveys, make sure you fill those out and you know, bring up those concerns. Another great way of kind of bringing your concerns and stuff in regards to benefits, I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a great way, but if you go to Glassdoor, right, and you can read, like, if you look on Glassdoor, you can pull up a company and you can see employee feedback on the organization's benefits, the organization's, you know, like, what are some things, pros and cons there, you know? And so, I mean, you can go and rate it. You yourself as an employee can go and say, you know, the benefits here aren't that great. And as an HR person, when I go to the Glassdoor and I'm looking at the reviews and I see like, man, there are a lot of complaints about our benefits. Well, guess what? You know, like I'm going to push to try to make sure like our benefits get improved, you know? And so definitely speak up if you don't think that your benefits are great.
And you don't have to, like, that's what those surveys are, right? And if you know, like me or like other folks, you're shy about, you know, putting your thoughts and ideas, that's what surveys can do. You can do it in a written format or, you know, digital format. So
yeah, and sometimes you have like, sorry.
There goes me says, thank you for sharing the info. You're so knowledgeable.
Oh, thank you.
I want to click Ch that's how she got connected to Jennifer. And then of course, Mel says, great advice. Awesome.
So Ch actually, I have a group called Hmong HR Professionals on Facebook, and Ch is actually one of my members on there. So if you are interested in going into HR, there is an HR Facebook group for Hmong professionals if you are Hmong and you're looking to go into the field.
And I have one last question, and this is probably my diversity inclusion question, right? Do you think that as a person of color or as a woman or even more as a Hmong woman or a minority, right, entering into HR, which is predominantly has historically been, right, dominated by a lot of white identified professionals, right? Do you think that it was a barrier or a challenge going into this field? Or did at any point in time, did you feel like you faced a certain barriers because of your identity?
So I would have to say that there are,
how did you approach it?
yeah, there are pros and cons actually, being a person of color. One of the pros is that a lot of organizations, especially now, right, they're looking for diversity, like they're looking for people in HR who have different backgrounds and stuff. So being a person of color can sometimes actually give you a leg up in applying for certain positions. But definitely like going into the position, I mean, I've worked at one of my first HR jobs, I won't say which organization it was predominantly white. And I mean, there were, you know, they made jokes and stuff about certain things that I was not comfortable with. And I was so early on in my career. And I didn't know how to really speak up as a person of color, right? And say, like, you know, please don't say that, that's inappropriate, or that makes me uncomfortable. And so, yeah, being a person of color definitely could be a challenge in HR. I myself have gone through it. One way to combat that, or to, you know, if you as a person of color are still alone going into an organization where it's like predominantly white, and you don't have, you know, a network there, is to create your own network, or to find a network outside of, you know, your organization. So for example, like on Facebook, there is a group called HR Practitioners of Color. And I love that group. I love that, because they give you a different perspective on HR, and you get to see, like, okay, you are definitely not alone, you know, and they give you scenarios and tips on how to deal with like awkward situations as a person of color that you have never, you know, really, like your peers at your workplace who are predominantly white have never had to deal with. And you're just like, how am I going to, you know, deal with this situation? There's resources like that you can go to. Right now, my organization, as I can't even say enough how much I love my organization. Like, we are so big on diversity, equity, and inclusion way before this year, way before it became even a thing. And we have what are called employee resource groups. And, you know, DEI is so big at our organization. We have like groups for people of color. We have groups for people who deal with mental illness. We have, you know, different types of groups. And that is part of really being able to bring your whole self to work, right? Feeling like you're accepted for who you are in an organization that you work for. And that's a challenge as an HR person of color, is that if you go to a place where it's predominantly white, I would challenge you to challenge the status quo. I would challenge you to ask, why are we not hiring more people of color? If you work in an organization where the leadership is predominantly white, I challenge you to ask, when are we going to hire a person of color? Because it's really important that you are not a passive person as a person of color, that you're really representing people of color, and that you're pushing for more diversity in an organization. Because being passive is not going to change things, you know. Asking and challenging the status quo is what really changes stuff. And so I wish I could go back in time to when I was younger in HR. And because I remember when I left this, one of the organizations I worked for, and we got to leave, you know, like we did exit interviews and stuff and leave feedback on what can be improved. And I remember writing on one of the things like more diversity in leadership, because as a person of color, I was the only person of color like that was in my HR group. And oftentimes, like, I dealt with stuff that no other HR person in my group had to deal with. And I mean, one of those was I literally had an employee come up to me and make a really offensive remark about, you know, Asian people. And I was just in shock, because I was like, is this really happening in like a professional work environment? Like, how do I deal with this? You know, and I was so new and so uncomfortable with like the situation. And I just kept quiet about it. And I thought, if I had had like a person of color, like in HR who was working with me, I could have gone to that person and told that person about that situation and asked, you know, what should I do? You know, and I would have felt more comfortable like having that discussion then. But instead I had to wait until like I was exiting the company to leave that remark.
Missed opportunity. Right. But yeah, and I think that really speaks what Mel says, you know, we learn as we grow, as we become more aware of, you know, situation and understanding like what our resources are, what our allies are, right? What can we ask? What can we say? And challenging, right? And building the confidence to do so too. And that's safe for us. Absolutely. Yi mentions really quick, that's so great. My organization emphasizes D&I too. And I'm grateful for that. Absolutely. Really quick, Mel says, I've been there, those people, friend and family from all from one God. That is why I think it's funny, make fun of people who are not like them. Yeah. And of course, Bien says, great perspective. I agree with the challenging status quo, right? But doing it in a strategic, right, and thoughtful manner in order to influence organizational change. Absolutely. And so, those are going to be, situations where, it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if you are the one representing a whole entire, right, group of people who are opposite from the people who work there. And so it's tough, it's hard, right? And again, as you go into your profession, you become more confident and you have to, I tell you, it is a brave conversation. It's a hard conversation, but it needs to be asked, and what's the worst that will happen? What's the worst that they'll say? They just won't respond, right? They won't do anything, right?
Exactly.
But at least you put it out there into their minds, right?
Yeah. And I love that, that mentality, right? That, that is the way that I approach things too. I always think like the worst situations, they're going to say no. But I do agree with Bien that change and stuff especially needs to happen in a very strategic and thoughtful manner. Like my previous CEO, he would always tell me like, well, what's the proposal for what you want to happen, right? He always challenged me. Like if I wanted something to happen, he would always say, yeah, like, give me the financials on it. How much is it going to cost? What's going to be the ROI? What's going to be the impact? And I love that because it really taught me how to think strategically and in a very business-like manner. Like, what's going to be the benefits? What's going to be the cost? How is this going to influence the organization? And so being very strategic in how you approach certain initiatives is really important, especially if you want those initiatives to pass, is that you take that strategic approach. And timing is everything. You have to think about where the organization is. And sometimes like an initiative that you want to happen, like for example, DEI, like, maybe 5 years ago wasn't a big thing and they probably put it on the back burner and they were like, that's not a big thing. But now is the perfect time to, present initiatives. Yeah. So if it wasn't something that was maybe top of mind 5 years ago, currently it's definitely, top of mind. So if you've been waiting to, give a proposal on maybe hiring a more diverse workforce, right now might be a really good time to do it.
Yeah. I know we are right at the end here. We actually went over, but if you have questions, feel free to pop in chat, but we are wrapping up. I just want to thank so much, Jennifer, for your time and your energy and your perspective and your thought of walking us through your career and your journey, right? And this helping us learn more about what people do in HR, right? How to get started, as well as, some challenges that may await, for us as we're in very unique times, right? So I really appreciate Jennifer's time and energy. And thank you all so much for coming to hang out with us tonight. I know that many of you probably are doing, cooking, dinner, folding laundry, trying to get the kids. Totally understandable. So again, thank y'all so much. Really appreciate your time and energy. Come back on Friday. I am doing how to write a cover letter. So, kind of going back to what Jennifer is like, understanding the company values, right? We're going to talk about how to integrate, oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher that word, integrate that into your own cover letter. And so come back for that. And then next Wednesday, we're jumping right into another, again, Meet the Pros. We're going to meet with 𝗤𝗲𝗍, who's a Deputy Director of API and Education Endowment. And so she's going to walk us through her career as well. So thank y'all so much. You guys are, again, rock stars. No, Mel, you guys are the rock stars. Thank you guys so much. Again, really appreciate your energy, your time here, the questions y'all ask. Absolutely. And again, come back again on Wednesdays and Fridays and Sundays. This month, I'm doing a lot of streaming and about content to help y'all, especially if you are, again, in your current jobs, or maybe you're planning to change jobs, or hey, you just want to come and hang out with us and learn more about what are the cool jobs out there that folks are doing. So thank y'all so much. Y'all have a good night. Okay, folks?
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.